The taco was perfect. The situation was not. It was 7:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting a golden hour glow over the manicured purgatory that was the Oak Creek subdivision. I was standing on my front porch, wearing gym shorts and a t-shirt that said, "I paused my game to be here," holding a carnitas taco dripping with salsa verde in my left hand. In front of me stood Officer Miller. Officer Miller looked like he had been having a long week since about 1998. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes were heavy with the spiritual fatigue of a man who joined the force to fight crime, but ended up arbitrating disputes about fence heights and barking doodles. "Sir," Miller said, his voice flat. "We received a call." I took a bite of the taco. It was a stress bite. "A call, officer? Did someone rob the convenience store down on 5th? "No, sir." Miller shifted his weight. "The call was regarding a biohazard." I chewed slowly. A biohazard. Like nuclear waste? Anthrax? Miller sighed. It was a long, rattling sigh that seemed to deflate his tactical vest slightly. Mrs. Higgins at 402 reported and I quote, "noxious cloud of decay reminiscent of a decomposing body, emanating from your side yard." I stopped chewing. I looked past Miller's shoulder to the house next door. 402. Brenda. Brenda Higgins was a woman who treated the Homeowners Association bylaws like they were the Geneva Convention. Her hydrangeas were measured with a ruler. Her lawn was greener than a golf course painted with envy. And apparently, her nose was calibrated to detect the scent of rotting fruit from 300 yards away. "Officer," I said, swallowing the taco. "She's talking about my compost bin." "The report says unidentified slurry pit," Miller corrected, reading from a small notepad. "She also mentioned she feared for the safety of the neighborhood children due to airborne pathogens." "It's a plastic tumbler from Home Depot, officer. It cost me $49. It contains grass clippings, 3 banana peels, and maybe some coffee grounds. The only thing airborne in my yard is the pollen that's currently killing my sinuses." Miller looked at me. I looked at Miller. "Can I see the pit?" he asked. "Please." I gestured with the hand holding the taco. "Follow me to the scene of the crime." We walked around the side of the house. The evening air was sweet, smelling faintly of jasmine and freshly cut grass. We arrived at the offending object. A black, dual-chamber tumbling composter sitting innocuously on a bed of gravel. It was about the size of a beer keg. It was closed. It was silent. It was, by all accounts, the most boring object in the continental United States. Miller approached it cautiously, hand resting near his belt. Habit, I assumed, rather than fear of being attacked by a rogue zucchini. He leaned in. He sniffed. He sniffed again. He leaned closer, his nose inches from the plastic vents. "Smell." Miller paused. "Dirt?" I suggested. "Earth? The cycle of life?" "Mulch," Miller decided. "It smells like a bag of mulch." "Is mulch a biohazard, officer?" "Not in this jurisdiction, no." He straightened up, adjusting his belt. "Look, sir. Dave, call me Dave. Dave, look, it doesn't smell. I know it doesn't smell, you know it doesn't smell, but Brenda called 911. She called 911? She told dispatch there was a chemical situation. That triggers a dispatch, which means I have to file a report, which means I have to document that I investigated the source of the odor. And found nothing. Found a compost bin, Miller corrected. Technically, under City Ordinance 44A, if a neighbor files a sensory complaint, code enforcement gets a copy of my report automatically. Code enforcement? I felt a prickle of irritation. You mean Gary? Miller grimaced. Everyone knew Gary. Gary was a man who derived sexual gratification from measuring grass height with a tape measure. Yeah, Gary will probably swing by. Unbelievable. I finished my taco aggressively. Brenda is weaponizing the police force because she doesn't like looking at a black plastic barrel. Just maybe move it behind the fence line? Miller suggested, turning to leave. Help me out here, Dave. I have actual crimes to solve. Someone stole a catalytic converter on Elm Street. I'll think about it, I lied. The next morning, I was working from home, which meant I was sitting in my underwear answering emails and drinking espresso when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the polite ding-dong of a delivery driver. It was the authoritative three-rap knock of bureaucracy. I threw on a robe and opened the door. Gary. Gary was a man shaped like a pear that had been left in the sun too long. He wore a short-sleeved dress shirt with a tie that stopped 3 inches above his belt line. He held a clipboard like a shield. "Mr. Miller," Gary said. He didn't look at my face. He looked at the siding of my house, probably checking for unauthorized paint chips. "It's Dave. What do you want, Gary?" "Received a transfer report from PD regarding a nuisance structure," Gary droned, tapping his pen against the clipboard. "I performed a drive-by inspection at 0800 hours. "And?" Gary handed me a slip of pink paper. It vibrated in the wind. Citation number 49201B. Violation. Improper storage of refuse in non-permanent structure. Details. Visual blight. Structure visible from street thoroughfare. Structure not anchored. Structure lacks approved aesthetic shielding. Fine. $50,000 per day until remedied. I stared at the paper. Improper storage of refuse? It's compost, Gary. It's fertilizer. "It's waste matter," Gary said, finally meeting my eyes. His glasses were smudged. "And it's in a non-permanent container visible from the sidewalk. You have 24 hours to remove it or conceal it behind an approved privacy screen." "A privacy screen?" I laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "You want me to build a fence for my garbage can?" "It's not a garbage can," Gary corrected smugly. "Garbage cans are exempt under sanitation statutes. This is an auxiliary processing unit. Totally different code." He turned to waddle back to his white, city-issued sedan. "Have a nice day, Mr. Miller." I stood there, clutching the pink slip. I looked over at Brenda's yard. She was there. Of course she was there. She was wearing a sun hat the size of a satellite dish, pruning her roses. She didn't look at me, but I saw the corner of her mouth twitch. It was a smile. A micro-smile of victory. I marched over to the property line. "Brenda!" I called out. She jumped, feigning surprise. She clutched her chest. "Oh, David, you startled me. Is everything okay? I saw the police last night. And Gary just now. Is there trouble?" "You know exactly what's happening, Brenda. You called 911 on a compost bin." She sighed, a sound of pure, distilled condescension. "David, sweetie, it's not about the bin. It's about the standards. We have a certain aesthetic in Oak Creek. That thing. It looks like an industrial accident. It looks like a shantytown. I'm just worried about property values." Shantytown. The word echoed in my brain. My $49 tumbler. My eco-friendly attempt to reduce landfill waste. A shantytown. "Property values," I repeated. "Exactly," she beamed. "I'm sure you understand. Just put it in the garage." "Compost needs air, Brenda. It's an aerobic process." "Well," she snipped a rose head off with a violent snick. "Then maybe you shouldn't be doing it at all. Leave the farming to the farmers, David. She turned her back on me. That was the moment. That was the exact millisecond I decided I wasn't going to pay the $50. I wasn't going to move the bin. I wasn't going to build a privacy screen. I was going to build a monument. I did not sleep that night. I brewed a pot of coffee thick enough to pave a driveway and sat in front of my dual monitor setup. On the left screen, the City Municipal Code, Volume 4, Zoning and Sanitation. On the right screen, a blank notepad document titled Operation Soil War TXT. The city code was 4,000 pages of legal boredom designed to make normal humans lose the will to live. But I was not a normal human. I was a software engineer with a minor in petty disputes and a caffeine overdose. I read, page 45, Refuse containers. Boring. Page 102, Fence height restrictions, 6 feet max. Brenda's trellis was 6'2". I noted that for later leverage, but it wasn't the kill shot I needed. Page 300. Odor nuisance. Subjective. Hard to fight. I scrolled. I searched keywords. Dirt. Waste. Structure. It was 3:14 a.m. when I found it. It was buried in Chapter 14, Special Exemptions for Scientific and Agricultural Development. A section clearly written in the 1950s to encourage Cold War-era science fairs, or maybe to let the local university run experiments without getting fined for ugly greenhouses. Section B, Paragraph 4. Permanent auxiliary structures designated for scientific or educational agricultural research are exempt from aesthetic zoning restrictions. See Section 9 to C regarding visual blight, provided they meet safety ventilation standards and are anchored to a concrete foundation. I stopped breathing. I reread it. Scientific or educational agricultural research. The code didn't define research. It didn't say I had to be a university. It didn't say I had to be a scientist. It just said the structure had to be designated for it. I scrolled down to Section D, Safety Standards for Research Structures. Any decomposition or chemical analysis structure exceeding 5 cubic feet must be equipped with active ventilation capable of cycling internal air volume 4 times per hour, and must display internal temperature readings externally for safety monitoring. A slow, terrifying grin spread across my face. They wanted a permanent structure? Fine. I would give them a permanent structure. They wanted me to hide the bin? No. The code said if it was for science, it was exempt from aesthetic restrictions. I didn't have to hide it. I could make it the focal point of the entire neighborhood. I wasn't composting anymore. I was conducting high-velocity aerobic decomposition studies. I opened a CAD program. I started drawing. The citation had accused me of having a non-permanent structure. So step 1. Concrete. Lots of it. A slab that would survive a direct hit from a bunker buster. Step 2. Ventilation. The code said minimum 4 cycles per hour. It didn't state a maximum. I looked up industrial server farm cooling fans. 400 CFM, cubic feet per minute. Jet turbines, essentially. Step 3. External temperature display. The code implied a small analog thermometer. I pulled up a catalog for stadium signage. I found a programmable LED matrix, 24 inches by 36 inches, high-vis red, waterproof. I sketched the design. It looked like a cross between a NASA lunar lander and a bank vault. It was an abomination. It was beautiful. It was going to cost me thousands of dollars. It was going to ruin my weekends for a month. But the mental image of Brenda staring out her kitchen window at a glowing, humming, industrial monolith processing 3 banana peels, it was priceless. I hit print on the blueprints. The printer whirred. I picked up the phone. It was 7:00 a.m. I Googled, "general contractors near me willing to build weird stuff." I dialed the first number. "Yeah, this is Big Mike," a voice grunted. It sounded like he was eating gravel for breakfast. "Mike," I said, my voice trembling with lack of sleep and excess of adrenaline. "How do you feel about pouring concrete for a scientific facility?" "A what?" "I need to build a ventilated containment unit. For soil." "For soil," Mike repeated flatly. "Yes. And it needs to be polished aluminum. And it needs to be done fast, before the Kyatin city inspector comes back." There was a pause. "Buddy," Mike said, "I charge extra for weird." "Mike," I said, looking out the window at Brenda's prize-winning petunias, "I am prepared to pay for very weird." I hung up. The war had begun. Big Mike arrived at 8:00 a.m. on Saturday. He drove a truck that was less of a vehicle and more of a geological event. It was a Ford F-350 with a lift kit that required a grappling hook to enter, painted a matte black that seemed to absorb the morning sunlight. He parked it directly on my lawn, not the driveway, the actual lawn, and killed the engine. It shuddered and died with a sound like a dying buffalo. I walked out to meet him, clutching my coffee mug and my rolled-up blueprints. Big Mike hopped down. He was shaped like a vending machine that had been taught to walk. He wore Carhartt pants that were older than me and a t-shirt that simply said dirt. "You the guy with the soil problem?" Mike asked. His voice sounded like gravel being crushed in a blender. "I'm Dave," I said, extending a hand. "And it's not a problem. It's an opportunity for scientific advancement." Mike shook my hand. His grip could have crushed a bowling ball. He looked at the spot where my sad little plastic tumbler currently sat. "That it?" "That's the subject," I nodded, "but we're upgrading. Here." I unfurled the plans on the hood of his truck. Mike stared at them. He stared for a long time. He tilted his head. He took a toothpick out of his mouth, examined it, and put it back. "Dave," he said slowly, "this is a bunker." "It's a high-velocity aerobic decomposition chamber," I corrected. Mike pointed a sausage-like finger at the drawing. "You got reinforced concrete footings here, 3 feet deep. You building a bomb shelter. Stability is key for accurate thermal readings, Mike. And this?" He squinted. "Is that a turbine?" "Intake fan, industrial grade, variable speed." "For apple cores?" Mike looked at me. His eyes were wide, innocent and confused. "You want an intake turbine? For apple cores?" "It's for aerobic efficiency, Mike. I need 400 CFM of airflow or the data is compromised. If the microbial lattice overheats, the nitrogen balance is ruined." I threw in microbial lattice, just to see if he'd blink. He didn't. "Right," Mike said. "And the siding? You wrote polished aluminum, mirror finish." "Maximum solar reflectivity," I lied. "Keeps the core temp stable." Mike sighed. He looked at the plans. He looked at my house. He looked at Brenda's house next door. He looked back at me, and a slow realization dawned in his eyes. He wasn't a scientist, but he was a man of the world. He knew a spite fence when he saw one. "She complain?" Mike jerked his chin toward Brenda's flower beds. "She called 911, I said. Mike's face didn't change, but his aura shifted. He nodded solemnly. $6 grand. "Make it 8, I said. I want the concrete poured by Tuesday, and I want the siding so shiny it burns retinas. Mike cracked a smile. It was terrifying. I'll get the mixer. The cement mixer arrived on Tuesday at 7:15 a.m. If you have never heard a commercial cement mixer operating in a quiet residential cul-de-sac at sunrise, imagine a dinosaur chewing on a washing machine full of rocks. Grrr chunk, grrr chunk. I stood on the porch, wearing a hard hat I had bought on Amazon for $12. It said, Site Safety Manager. I was drinking tea. The back door of 402 flew open. Brenda emerged. She was wearing a silk robe and fuzzy slippers, and her hair was in curlers. She looked like a rage-filled poodle. "David!" she shrieked over the mechanical roar. "What in God's name is happening?" I walked over to the fence line, adjusting my hard hat. "Morning, Brenda!" I shouted. "Just laying the foundation." "Foundation for what? A guest house? You can't build a guest house this close to the property line. I know the setbacks. 5 feet, David, 5 feet." "It's not a domicile, Brenda," I yelled back, pointing to the wet gray sludge sliding down the chute. "It's a permitted foundation for scientific advancement. Setback for auxiliary research structures is only 18 inches. "Research?" she sputtered. "Research on what?" "Soil microbiology." I pointed to the mixer. "We're breaking ground on the Oak Creek District 9 Soil Laboratory." Mike, bless his heart, chose that exact moment to rev the mixer's engine to clear a jam. A cloud of gray dust puffed into the air, drifting gently toward Brenda's prize-winning hydrangeas. She gasped and retreated inside, slamming the door so hard I felt it in my teeth. "She seems nice," Mike yelled from the cab. "She's a delight," I replied. By Friday, the frame was up. By the following Monday, the siding was on. It was aggressive. The structure was a 6-foot cube, but with the ventilation stack, it reached nearly 8 feet. The polished aluminum reflected the sun with laser-like intensity. If you stood in the wrong spot in the backyard around noon, you would get a tan in 30 seconds. But the pièce de résistance was the electrical work. I hired a guy named Sparky. I assumed that was a nickname, but his invoice actually said Sparky's Electric. He was a wiry guy who vibrated slightly, possibly from too much caffeine, possibly from low-level electrocution. "So, let me get this straight," Sparky said, standing inside the metal box. The acoustics were incredible. "You want a server rack cooling fan, a Raspberry Pi controller, and a traffic light?" "Not a traffic light. A status tower, like they have in factories." I held up the unit I'd bought. It was a stack of industrial LEDs. Green, amber, red. Green means composting, I explained. Amber means processing. Red means critical heat mass. "And when do you want them on?" "Green, always. 24/7, maximum brightness." Sparky looked at the unit. "Dave, this is an industrial signal light. It's meant to be seen across a Ford assembly plant. At night, this is going to look like a landing strip." "Safety first, Sparky. Can't have people tripping over the science." Sparky shrugged and started stripping wires. "Your electric bill is going to go up." "Small price to pay for data," I said, watching him mount the light tower on the highest point of the roof, directly facing Brenda's bedroom window. When they turned it on for the test, it was glorious. A piercing emerald beam of light cut through the afternoon haze. It was the green eye of a very eco-friendly Sauron. "It works!" I shouted. "It's blinding," Sparky noted, shielding his eyes. "It's science," I corrected. The first week of operation was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The fan, my beloved 400 CFM industrial intake, didn't just blow air. It hummed. It wasn't a rattle. It wasn't a clank. It was a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated at exactly 60 hertz. It was the sound of a refrigerator having an anxiety attack. It ran 24 hours a day. On day 3, the inevitable happened. I was in the yard, calibrating the sensors, holding a clipboard and looking at nothing, when the white sedan rolled up. Gary. He got out of the car slower this time. He looked tired. He looked like a man who knew he was walking into a trap, but had to do it anyway because his pension depended on it. "Mr. Miller?" Gary said, standing on the sidewalk. He refused to come onto the driveway. "Gary?" I waved the clipboard. "Come to see the facility? We're just bringing the nitrogen scrubbers online." "I have a complaint," Gary said, looking at the gleaming silver cube. He squinted. The reflection was hitting him right in the bifocals. "Multiple complaints. Regarding glare. Regarding noise. Regarding... Is that a laser?" He pointed at the green light. "Status indicator. Mandatory under OSHA for active machinery," I lied. "This is a residential zone, Dave," Gary snapped, his patience thinning. "You can't just build a factory in your backyard. I'm citing you for unauthorized commercial structure, noise violation, and whatever that light is." He pulled out his pad. He was reaching for the pink slip. "Gary, wait," I said, my voice dropping to a silky, helpful tone. "Before you write that, I really think you should check the educational exemptions again." I walked over to my patio table and picked up the binder. It was a 3-inch black binder. I had labeled the spine. Oak Creek Soil Analysis Project. Permits and legal precedent. I thumped it onto the hood of Gary's car. "What is this?" Gary asked. "That," I opened it to the first tab, "is my signed affidavit designating this structure as a dedicated research station for non-profit agricultural study. Per Municipal Code 14B4, I am exempt from aesthetic zoning." Gary stared at the paper. "You're not a research station." "I am live streaming soil temperature data to the cloud," I said. "I have a blog. It has 4 subscribers. One of them is my mom, but it counts as educational outreach." Gary flipped the page. "Noise," I said. "Section 9. Allowable decibels for daytime machinery is 65. Nighttime is 55. I pulled a decibel meter out of my pocket. I held it up. The fan hummed. Thrum! The meter read 54.2 dB. I calibrated the fan speed to sit exactly 0.8 decibels below the legal limit, I whispered. "It's perfectly legal, Gary. It's just present." Gary looked at the meter. He looked at the binder. He looked at the blinding chrome box. "The light," he grasped at straws. "It's light pollution." "Safety beacon," I countered, flipping to tab 4. Section D. Any decomposition structure must display internal status. If I turn it off, I'm in violation of the safety code you cited me on last week. Do you want me to create an unsafe work environment, Gary? Gary's face turned a shade of red that clashed with the green light. He knew. He knew I had him. He knew that to beat me, he would have to do actual work. He would have to file motions. He would have to call the city attorney. Gary did not want to call the city attorney. Gary wanted to go to lunch. "Fine," Gary hissed. He shoved the binder back at me. "But if that thing goes 1 decibel over, if I smell 1 whiff of rot, I'm shutting you down. I'll bring a warrant." "Understood, Inspector," I saluted. Science respects the law. Gary got in his car and peeled out. I turned back to the lab. Brenda was watching from her upstairs window. I could see her silhouette against the blinds. I walked over to the control panel on the side of the box, a fake panel I had glued on. I looked up at her window. I made a show of turning a dial. The fan pitch increased slightly. Not louder, just higher, a more annoying frequency. I gave her a thumbs up. The blinds snapped shut. But the war wasn't over. I knew Brenda. She wouldn't stop at Gary. She would go higher. She would go to the HOA board. She would go to the mayor. I needed to legitimize the operation. I needed social proof. I pulled out my phone and opened the group chat for the neighborhood block party committee. Me. Hey everyone, big news. To celebrate the new eco initiative, I'm hosting a green science launch party this Saturday. Free tacos. Educational demo for the kids. I hit send. If Brenda wanted to shut me down, she'd have to do it in front of an audience eating free carnitas. The trap was set. If you are going to do something incredibly petty, you must do it with class. I didn't just text the neighbors. I went to a stationery store. I bought cream-colored linen cardstock, 100 balboas weight. I bought gold foil envelopes. I printed invitations that looked like they were for a diplomatic summit or a royal wedding. You are cordially invited to the inaugural commissioning of the Oak Creek District 9 Soil Health Monitoring Station. Keynote speaker, David Miller. Lead researcher, catering. El Fuego Tacos. Attire, casual, lab. Coats encouraged. I placed Brenda's invitation in her mailbox personally. I wore white cotton gloves while I did it, just in case she checked for fingerprints. Saturday arrived with the sort of aggressive sunshine that makes Chrome look particularly dangerous. By 11 o'clock a.m., the taco truck was parked in my driveway. The smell of al pastor and grilled onions wafted through the neighborhood, a olfactory siren song that no suburban dad could resist. Neighbors started trickling in. There was Ted from across the street, who mostly came to escape his toddlers. There was Sarah from 3 doors down, who brought a bottle of wine because she thought this was a housewarming. And there was Gary. Yes, Gary the inspector showed up. He wasn't in uniform. He was wearing a polo shirt tucked into jean shorts. He looked confused, but he also looked hungry, and he was eyeing the taco truck like a shark eyes a seal. "Gary," I greeted him, handing him a margarita. "Glad you could make it to the ribbon cutting." "I'm technically off the clock," Gary mumbled, taking the drink. "But if I see a code violation, I'm clocking back in." "Understood. Enjoy the guacamole." The facility was covered by a massive blue tarp. It sat in the side yard, humming menacingly beneath the plastic. The green light of the status tower pulsed through the tarp like a heartbeat. At noon, I stood on a cooler to address the crowd. There were about 30 people. Most of them were eating tacos. None of them knew why they were there. "Friends, neighbors, Gary," I began, raising a hand. "For too long, we have ignored the silent crisis beneath our feet. The soil, the dirt, the earth stuff." Ted nodded solemnly, his mouth full of pork. "Some have called my methods unsightly," I continued, casting a glance toward Brenda's house. Her blinds were open. She was watching. "Some have called them a shanty town. But today we embrace the future. Today we embrace the science." I signaled to Big Mike, whom I had paid an extra $100 to attend as head of security. He yanked the rope. The tarp fell away. A collective gasp went through the crowd, mostly because the sun hit the polished aluminum siding and blinded half the cul-de-sac. It was magnificent. The structure stood 8 feet tall. The chrome ventilation stack gleamed against the blue sky. The cooling fans spun with a smooth, industrial whir. But the centerpiece was the digital readout I had programmed that morning. Giant red LED letters scrolled across the face of the cube. Nitrogen. Optimal moisture. 42%. Nematode activity. Vibrant odor. Null. "What is it?" Sarah asked, shielding her eyes. "It's the soil laboratory," I said proudly. "Currently, it is processing 3 banana peels and a bag of coffee grounds at 400 cubic feet per minute." "It looks like a time machine," Ted said. "It's better, Ted. It's—" Weep, weep. The sound of a police siren cut me off. A cruiser rolled slowly up to the curb. Officer Miller. He didn't even turn the lights on. He just hit the siren once to let me know he was there. He stepped out of the car. He looked at the taco truck. He looked at the crowd. He looked at the chrome monolith humming in my yard. He took off his hat and rubbed his forehead. "Dave," Miller said as he walked up the driveway. "Officer Miller," I shouted. "Welcome. Grab a taco. We're just reviewing the nematode data." The front door of 402 burst open. Brenda came marching out. She wasn't in a robe this time. She was in her Sunday best, a floral dress that looked like upholstery. She was wielding a phone like a weapon. "Officer," she shrieked. "You see it? You see the monstrosity? I told you! It's a commercial chemical plant. He's refining something in there. Look at the lights. Look at the cooling towers." Miller looked at the structure. He looked at the scrolling text. Nematode activity. Vibrant. "Sir," Miller said to me, "does this thing process uranium?" "It processes pumpkin guts, officer, but at optimal thermal efficiency." "It's illegal!" Brenda yelled, pointing a manicured finger at the intake turbine. "It's loud! It's blinding! It's a hazard to aviation!" "Officer," I said calmly, stepping off the cooler. "I have the permits right here." I motioned to Big Mike. He handed me the binder. I opened it to the Safety and Compliance section. "As you can see," I tapped the page, "this is a Class 4 educational research structure. The decibel level is currently 58. The glare is within the reflective index allowed for scientific instrumentation. And the green light is a mandatory safety beacon required by Code 14D. Miller looked at the paper. He looked at Gary, who was eating a taco in the corner. "Gary," Miller asked, "is this legit?" Gary swallowed. "Technically, yes. It's an exempt research facility, as long as he's collecting data." "I am." I turned to the crowd. "Who here wants to be a junior soil scientist?" I pulled a box from behind the cooler. Inside were 50 plastic badges I had made at Kinko's. They featured a clip art worm wearing glasses and said, "Certified Dirt Inspector." I started handing them out to the neighborhood kids. The kids went wild. They ran toward the machine, mesmerized by the flashing lights. "See?" I gestured to the children. "Educational outreach. The youth are engaging with the biomass." Brenda turned purple. "This is a farce. This is a spite house. You can't just call garbage science." "Actually, Brenda," I said, handing a badge to Officer Miller, "that's exactly what science is. Observing the natural world. And right now, I'm observing that your blood pressure seems to be affecting the local humidity." Miller stared at the badge in his hand. He looked at the chrome box. He looked at Brenda, who was vibrating with a frequency higher than my cooling fans. "Mrs. Higgins," Miller said, putting the badge in his pocket. "It seems everything is in order here. Code enforcement is on site. The permits are valid, and frankly, the tacos are excellent." Brenda made a sound like a tea kettle boiling over. She spun on her heel and marched back to her house. "I'm calling the mayor," she screamed before slamming the door. "You do that," I called after her. "We'll be here, monitoring the nematodes." I thought the mayor threat was a bluff. It was not a bluff. 3 days later, on a Tuesday, a black SUV pulled up. It wasn't the police. It wasn't Gary. It was a vehicle that radiated serious government energy. A man stepped out. He wore a hard hat, a reflective vest over a suit, and carried a laser distance measurer. "Mr. Miller?" he asked. "That's me. I'm Chief Engineer Henderson, City Public Works. We received a complaint from the mayor's office regarding a potential seismic hazard in your backyard." Brenda had told the mayor I was building a reactor that could cause an earthquake. You had to admire her creativity. "Seismic hazard?" I laughed nervously. "It's a compost bin, sir." "Show me." We walked to the back. The lab was humming away. The red text now read, "Internal temp, 102 GF. Decomposition. Rapid." Henderson didn't look at the permits. He didn't look at the siding. He walked right up to the intake fan. He pulled out an airflow meter. He held it up to the vent. Whirr. He looked at the reading. He raised an eyebrow. 420 CFM? He asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "Variable speed controller. I keep it high to oxygenate the pile." Henderson walked around the back. He inspected the concrete footing. He kicked it with his steel-toed boot. Solid. He looked at the drainage sluice I had installed, a PVC pipe leading to a bucket. "This is custom ductwork," Henderson murmured, running a hand along the aluminum. "Riveted seams?" "Airtight," I confirmed, "to trap the methane for a controlled release." Henderson turned to me. He wasn't angry. He was impressed. He was an engineer. He loved over-engineered nonsense. "Mr. Miller," he said, clicking his pen, "most people just pile crap in a corner. This is beautiful. You've created a localized convection current that accelerates breakdown by at least 300%. "That was the goal, sir. Efficiency." "I'm marking this down as a model of residential waste management," Henderson said, scribbling on his pad. "I might actually use this in my next quarterly report on green initiatives. Hell, I wish the city treatment plant ran this smoothly." I felt a surge of triumph so potent it was almost dizzying. I had won. I had won on every level. And then Brenda came out. She had seen the black SUV. She had assumed I was being arrested. She marched over to the fence, expecting to see me in handcuffs. Instead, she saw the chief engineer shaking my hand. "What is this?" she demanded. "Why isn't he in jail? That machine is a blight. It smells." "Actually, ma'am," Henderson said, checking his notes, "it doesn't smell at all. The negative, pressure ventilation forces all odor through the carbon filter stack. It's quite ingenious." "It's garbage!" Brenda screamed. She lost it. The veneer of suburban politeness cracked. "It's a pile of trash in a tin can, and I hate it. I hate the lights. I hate the noise. I hate him." She stormed around the edge of the fence. She trespassed onto my property. "Brenda, get off the lawn," I warned. "I'm going to smash this thing," she yelled. She wound up her leg, her right leg, clad in a sensible loafer, and she kicked the Oak Creek District 9 soil laboratory. Now, remember, this thing was built by Big Mike. It was anchored to 3 feet of concrete. It was framed in steel and plated in aluminum. It was, for all intents and purposes, an immovable object. Brenda was an unstoppable force of rage. Clang. The sound was like a bell tolling. Snap. The sound was Brenda's toe. "Ah!" Brenda shrieked, hopping on one foot, clutching her injured appendage. But that wasn't the worst part. Her kick had landed squarely on the external drainage valve, the one part of the system I had installed myself, the one part I hadn't tightened with a wrench because I couldn't find the right size. The PVC valve cracked. For 3 weeks, the laboratory had been brewing. It had been heating, sweating, and liquefying 3 weeks' worth of fruit peels, coffee, grass, and leftovers. It had created about 5 gallons of concentrated, fermented, anaerobic compost tea. The valve gave way. A stream of dark, brown, lukewarm sludge shot out of the pipe. It didn't hit Brenda. That would have been too cliché. No, it shot past her. It arced through the air, and it splashed directly onto the pristine white concrete of her driveway, which spilled over onto her prize-winning petunias. The smell hit us a second later. It didn't smell like mulch. It didn't smell like earth. It smelled like the devil's gym socks fermented in vinegar. Henderson gagged. I took a step back. Brenda stopped screaming about her toe and stared at the puddle of sludge expanding across her property line. "My driveway," she whispered. "My flowers." She turned her fury on me. You did this! I'm suing you! I'm suing you for everything! Chemical warfare! Destruction of property!" "Actually," Henderson interrupted. He was holding a handkerchief to his nose, but his voice was firm. "I witnessed the event." Brenda froze. "Mrs. Higgins," Henderson said, "you crossed onto Mr. Miller's property. You physically assaulted a permitted city-approved structure. In doing so, you broke the containment valve." He pointed his pen at her. "That's vandalism, ma'am. And since this is a registered scientific monitoring station, that's a federal offense if we want to get technical about the EPA." Brenda looked at Henderson. She looked at her throbbing foot. She looked at the brown puddle destroying her curb appeal. She looked at me. I didn't say anything. I just pointed to the red LED sign. It scrolled, "System integrity. Compromised. Error. Error." Brenda burst into tears and limped back into her house. "Well," Henderson said, stepping carefully around the sludge, "I should probably go. You might want to fix that valve." "I'll get right on it, sir," I said. "For science." The peace treaty was signed on a Thursday. It wasn't signed in a palace or a boardroom. It was signed on the sidewalk between 402 and 404, directly over the stain where the compost tea had finally been power-washed away, at my expense, but worth it for the leverage. Officer Miller was present as the witness. He looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else on the planet, possibly a war zone, because it would be less stressful. "Okay," Miller said, holding a notepad. "Let's review the terms." Brenda stood with her arms crossed. Her toe was taped up in a sandal. She looked at me with the cold, dead eyes of a shark that had just bitten a surfboard made of steel. "Mrs. Higgins," Miller read, "you agree to withdraw all formal complaints regarding noise, glare, and general ugliness filed with the city, the HOA, and the mayor's office." Brenda grunted. "Fine." "And Mr. Miller," Miller turned to me, "you agree not to press charges for vandalism, destruction of private property, or biological sabotage resulting from the kick." "I do," I said solemnly, "in the interest of neighborhood harmony." "And," Miller added, looking at his notes, "Mr. Miller, you agree to dim the green light by 50% between the hours of 10 and 12 p.m. and 6 and 12 a.m. 20%, I countered. "It's a safety feature, officer." 30%, Miller said. "Take it or I write you a ticket for loitering on your own driveway." "Deal." I shook his hand. I turned to Brenda. Brenda, it's been a pleasure doing science with you. She didn't shake my hand. She just turned around, limped up her driveway, and began aggressively deadheading her hydrangeas. She hasn't spoken to me since. It has been the most peaceful month of my life. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a calculator and a beer. I decided to tally the final score. The original fine, $50 The expenses, concrete foundation and labor, $2,200 custom aluminum siding, mirror finish, $3,100. Big Mike's rush fee, $1,500. Industrial intake fans, X2, $800. Programmable LED matrix, $600. Sparky's electrical work, $1,200. Legal consultation. Google, 0. Taco truck and party supplies, $850. Power washing. Brenda's driveway, $250. Replacement PVC. Valve, $12. Emotional damage to Officer Miller, incalculable. Grand total, $10,512. I stared at the number. For $10,000, I could have bought a new car. I could have gone to Europe. I could have just paid the fine 200 times over. I looked out at the yard. The sun was setting, casting a long, orange shadow across the lawn. And there, rising from the earth like a monolith to human stubbornness, stood the Oak Creek District 9 soil laboratory. It was beautiful. The chrome reflected the twilight in streaks of violet and gold. The cooling fans hummed a low, steady mantra of efficiency. Thrum! And the sign, the glorious red LED sign. It glowed softly against the darkening sky. Temp, 98.6 degrees F. Status, aerobic. Brenda, silent. I stood up and walked over to the machine. I had a single tea bag in my hand, Earl Grey, steeped for exactly 4 minutes. I opened the intake chute. It was a heavy, hydraulic dampened drawer that felt like loading a torpedo. I placed the tea bag inside. I closed the chute. I hit the process button I had installed just for dramatic effect. The fans spun up. The hum deepened into a growl. The air pressure inside the chamber shifted, sucking the tea bag into the vortex of decomposition. It sounded like a jet engine preparing for takeoff. It was the most expensive tea bag disposal in the history of mankind. I looked up at Brenda's house. Her blinds were drawn tight. Not a single slat moved. I took a sip of my beer. It was worth every penny.